Okay, I'm going to do hopefully around 15 minutes. I'll try my best to stick to Ian's agenda. But I'm going to give you a little bit of my experience of how I got into sports and exercise science, a little bit about my time here, and a bit about my time since I've left. So a little snapshot, I suppose, into around the last 30-something years of my life. And that's frightening for me to say that. So I was educated in St. Munchin's College across the river here. I started there in 1982, and I didn't like school. In fact, I hated school, and I hope there's nobody here involved with St. Munchin's, but I particularly hated St. Munchin's. I boarded there for 2 years, and to be honest, it was a nightmare, and I have forgiven my parents a long time ago for sending me to boarding school, but I really, hand up, I hated school. I did no work at school. At my intercert, for those of you who remember the intercert, and it looks like most of you here probably do, for the intercert, I barely got through. About 6 months before the intercert, I got kicked out of Latin class. I failed my German. I really, bad student, but I was really into sport. I loved my sport. I played hurling, I played football for a hand. I was with my friends, we were always running around the place, always sport. We never really spent much time sitting in front of the television. There was obviously no PlayStations and the like back then. I was lucky enough that my parents had a big tarmac area in our back of our house where they set up tennis courts, so during the summer we were always playing tennis. Never very good, but we were always doing something. So I loved my sport. I was lucky enough then that two men from Limerick, Jimmy and Jerry O'Neill, moved out to Castleconnell where I lived from Limerick, and they set up a rowing club. And just by chance, a couple of friends of mine decided, why don't we give it a go? So we did. And I really got hooked in it, and then I gave up all the other sports, rugby, hurling, football. I gave them all up and started into my rowing career. And as Ian said, I competed for Ireland between the end of 91 up to about 95, 96. And in that time, obviously we trained really, really hard as rowers. It's a particularly gruesome sport. And we spent an awful lot of time down in a place called the National Coaching and Training Centre, where I would have met Pat first of all. We used to go down there every so often to get our physiological testing done. We had Elaine McGowan down there working on our diets. And because I was only living up the road here, by then I'd moved from Castleconnell, living only up the road here at the main traffic lights. Giles had me down at least once a week just to weigh in, and then he had me down every couple of weeks and we do some form of testing. And I go into Giles with a million questions. I would say Giles hated me because it was like, what's he going to ask me next? And it was question after question. Why are we doing this? Why am I doing that? For some reason, I just wanted to know. I wasn't happy that I was just following a program. I really wanted to know what I was doing. So Giles then one day said to me, do you know they're starting up a sports and exercise science degree here? Would you be interested? And I really didn't know. I didn't know anything about it. All I knew was the questions I was asking Giles. So Giles said to me, Joe, there's a man up the corridor you probably want to speak to. Named PJ Smith. So I went up to PJ's office, and if I'm honest, I met PJ, and I'm actually not too sure if I did meet PJ because I couldn't see him behind all the documents and books and stuff that were piled up on his desk. But there was a man behind all those books chatting to me. But PJ gave me my first physiology book, McCardle Catch and Catch, and he said, off you go and have a read of that, and come back to me in a few weeks. So I came back to PJ in a few weeks. This was, I don't know, PJ won't remember, but it was around, he might remember meeting me, but it was around in November, December 1993. So the first group had just done a couple of months. We were the second year, first year had just done a couple of months. And so I went back to PJ and I said, you know, that answered a good few questions for me. It was tough going for somebody that really didn't do well at school. I had to read a lot of things over and over again to understand what was going on, but it answered a lot of questions to me. And I said, you know, I'd really like to do this. So I applied then as a mature student. So I was just going on 25 at this stage, and I applied as a mature student. And that December, 26th of December that year, I went to Boston. I didn't know what I was doing. Again, I had no qualifications from school. I hadn't finished out the course I was doing in LIT, which is construction management, because I didn't really like it. And my rowing was the thing. It was all-consuming. But I needed to earn some money, so I went to the States for a while, and I didn't know when I'd be coming back. And around July, August, summer '94, I got a letter saying I'd been asked for an interview. So I came back from Boston for a couple of days to do the interview. So obviously I reckon I did a pretty decent interview, and they were probably impressed the fact that I came from America all the way over to do the interview, and I got my position in the course. So that brings me on now to sports and exercise science, and my memories. So my memories starting off here in first year was, one, at 26 I felt old, because I had all these youngsters out of school who at 18, 19 years old, to me seemed really young. It was all so strange in that they were coming into this real college life, and living the college life where I was an international rower. I had all my friends here based in Limerick. So bar being in class, I was probably very much removed from my group. Self-imposed, I admit. And Marguerite and my lovely wife Rhoda up there will probably agree that in the first couple of years I was probably difficult enough. I think I did my best to make Rhoda not like me. So that was my first thing. Next thing then was getting down to study. And again, as a person who didn't like school and not having studied, I could say since my leaving cert, but probably never having studied, I did find it difficult. But it was something that I really enjoyed. So then came probably the first big task for us as a group, was our first essay for Phil Jakeman. Okay? First task, but we got through it, and I remember, a pity now there's not some of the younger people here, but we wrote our essays the first time we did them. We didn't have, even though that's not so long ago, we didn't have all the computer technology that's there now. We didn't have the computer lab. If we wanted the computers, we had to go over to the main building, and you'd have to queue up for hours to get your stuff at the print room or the printer in the computer lab. So a lot of things we did were written in the first few years, or probably first year or two, and it got better as we moved on. By the time we were doing final year projects, everything was typed and printed. The other thing then is I had to realize, I saw Dave here as well, I realized that to pass athletics I had to set a world record in the 800 meters. And I did my best. And again, just to make Rhoda hate me even more, we had to do tasks on the track where we worked in pairs, and I worked with Rhoda one day. And we had to run the 400 meters, and it was one person would run 200 and the next person would run 200. And I loved it. I was very competitive, so I'd run my 200 as hard as you can. I'd come up to it, stop running so hard, I need a break. And I said, no, you're grand, keep going. So we had good fun, and as I said, I was very competitive, so it really suited me to do all the activities outside. Anytime there was a lab on, if they wanted to volunteer, the hand was up. I'll volunteer, I'll do anything. I just loved it. So then obviously we're here because of the opening of the building. So the building has changed hugely. I even remember as a young fella coming here from national school, we used to go to the Schumann building, the Schrodinger building across the way and do little experiments as primary school kids. But when we came to this building here, as most of you remember, we didn't have this lecture theatre. There was a swimming pool where there's now a physiology lab. The kinesiology lab used to be a weights room at one stage. My first year with Munster, that's where we did all our weight training. Across the way from that, we had the 4 squash courts, which are now gone in our biomechanics labs. And I even remember, I know some of the older people here will definitely remember, where where one of the new postgrad rooms are, where we used to have our physiology lab. There used to be a weights room in there, and they had a big one of these stations where you could everything was on one go and you could work your way around the station. You remember that, somebody? Yeah, I remember. Sorry? Multi-gym. I couldn't think of the word. I remember that. And even when we started, there was no arena up here. There was what was called the mud patch, where a lot of the teams would do a lot of their hard physical training rather than making a mess of the pitches above. The all-weather pitch, the AstroTurf up here, was pretty new at the time, and we certainly didn't have anything that was on the North Campus. So we've had a huge amount of change, not only in this building, but in the buildings within the area of where this building is. Obviously, we have to mention the staff, and I think we were very lucky, as the students are today, that we come into an environment where, I think probably because it's sport, staff, they just love doing what they do. And we were very fortunate when we came in that there were some brilliant staff that were here for a long, long time. We had obviously people like Jacinta O'Brien, who most of you will probably remember. And Jacinta was full of life. She just loved doing what she was doing, and all of us that went to her classes, we used to feed off of that. And so I think it's a pity that she's not here today to see what's been done with the building. Obviously, we had PJ, who'd been here since the building started, and we all remember PJ's lecture notes, where we had an A4 sheet of paper with a million different quotes from different people stuck onto it, and then good old Pat Gearan used to spend his time then photocopying pages for PJ so he could hand out his lecture notes to us. I think you've moved on since then, PJ. Yeah. So we were really, really lucky. And then we had a lot of young people coming in because the sports and exercise science was a new degree. And we had the likes of Kieran, who had come through the PE and now was branching into the sports and exercise science. And he was a great help for us when we were doing final year projects, because if you want to know about stats, you went to Kieran. And I'm sure he hated us, but he was a great help to us students when we needed to know about stats for final year projects. And then you had the likes of Ross, Phil Jakeman, Drew, all coming in and around the same time that we came in. So there was a real buzz around the place, a real, let's get this thing up and going. Obviously there was mistakes made along the way, and I'm sure the course that the students are doing now is far different than the one that we did. And I'm sure it's far better because of all the advances that have been made. So the course itself then, my experience of the course was I loved every minute of it. It was hard. We had to do a lot of work. As I said, I remember first it was a big eye-opener for me to really have to get into study. And as I said, we had to do that first essay for Phil, and I always remember that it was muscle contraction. And we had to do a 2-page essay on muscle contraction. And I probably got a false insecurity because I got an A+ in my first essay. And but that set me up, and I think that gave me the confidence to really keep going and to push it until it came to the summer exams. And I had been away a lot with the rowing, and I had missed a few things. And Catherine Adley, I could call her a nasty name, but she failed me. She failed me biochemistry. And I cursed her for the summer when I was away on camp and travelling around Europe racing, and I had to bring my biochemistry books everywhere I went and studied. But I think I loved the course. I loved the course because I knew what I wanted to do. There was a lot of varying, people liking, people not liking. There was a lot of people who weren't too sure what it was all about. There was a lot of people who used it to get into other avenues. A lot of people went into physiotherapy. Obviously, we've got postgrads in sports and exercise science. Marguerite and Rhoda went down kind of the health route, and then Rhoda's ended up back in the department. But I think we all loved the course. We all had good fun. Everybody worked hard. We worked well as groups. We were a smaller group. There was only about 29, 30 of us. And we really worked well. And group work was always good fun. One thing that, when I was looking back on it, myself and Rhoda were chatting, that the sports apps that they do now, they do one sports apps now, yeah, in third year. Is that right? Yeah. We used to do two, and we had to do two in fourth year. So along with our final year project, we had two sports apps, one in each semester. And they used to cause a lot of group trouble because you had the same marking or same weighting for a sports apps project as you did for a final year project. And you'd have people wanting to, let's get the group stuff done, because group work is easier to get marks in. You work along together and it's easier. Everybody does a little bit, rather than final year project, you just have to do your own. And you'd have people, I can't meet, I've got to do my final year project. And no matter how many times you tell them, but this is work just as much, people just couldn't get away from the fact that it's my final year project. So we had in groups should have a few arguments over that. But one thing I learned in fourth year was, actually, the course, it wasn't that hard, but you had to, but you had to work your ass off. Right? And we worked our ass off in fourth year. I never worked so hard in all my life when it came to study. And thankfully it paid off. Now, I was also lucky, I'm going to keep moving now, otherwise I'll run out of time. Because of my association with NCTC through the rowing, I ended up doing a few part-time little gigs for them down there. And they were in charge of this. There was an athletes' village up at Kilmurray. I don't think it's there anymore. It's not used as an athletes' village anymore. And a few houses, when you go up into Kilmurray village, that first little square you go into the left, and there was a row of houses there, the athletes' village. Some of you remember them, some of you won't. And they needed somebody to look after them, so when groups would come at weekends, somebody would greet them and give them the keys. And I somehow managed to persuade them to let me do the job. So that started, I suppose, my working relationship with the National Coaching and Training Centre, and as Ian said, now called Coaching Ireland. And they were looking for, when I graduated then, they were looking for a sports science officer. So again, I luckily got an interview, and I luckily persuaded them to give me the job. Now, it was a great year for me, and it got me up and going, I suppose, in the industry. It probably, looking back, it probably wasn't necessarily the correct role for me. It was about delivering courses, and it's funny because I've now come full circle, that's the area now that I really want to get into, but at the time I probably wasn't fully ready for it. But what it did do, it got me to meet Declan O'Leary. Where's Declan? Declan is there. It got me to meet Declan O'Leary, who works as a coach education officer down at Coaching Ireland. And I'm sorry if the title is wrong, but Declan used to work as a conditioner with Young Munsters Rugby Club, and he was finding it difficult to do the job with everything that he had on. So he asked me if I'd be interested in doing it. So I said I would. So I started off doing my 2 evenings a week, Tuesday and Thursday, with Young Munsters. And then around the time, this was 98, 99, and we had the 99 World Cup coming in rugby. And Peter Clohessy, being part of the squad, he used to come in, and Giles was working with them at the time, and Peter would come in, and Peter would be doing sessions with Giles. And then a few times then Giles wouldn't be able to be there, so he'd ask me would I supervise him on sessions. So I said I would. And obviously he's with Young Munsters Club. So we got chatting one day, and he said, there's a position coming up in Munster. And so luckily enough, I knew a guy called Philip Danaher, who was the backs coach for the Irish rugby team at the time. He was a couple of years ahead of me at school. So I rang up Philip and I said, any chance you could get me to meet Declan Kidney? So he got me to meet Declan Kidney, and I met him in Castletroy Park Hotel, and I gave him some spiel that I was the man that he wanted. And before, I managed to get the job without, probably totally illegal now, but I managed to get the job without them advertising. So then I find myself, sorry, I should have moved on. So I've done my stint in National Coaching and Training Centre, and then I ended up at Munster Rugby. So in my time at Munster Rugby, thankfully I had my sports science degree done, and I was able to use all the knowledge I had of researching, knowing what was good, what was bad, and to put it into practice with Munster. And we made huge gains at the very beginning. And when I joined them, I was the only full-time strength and conditioning coach that they had. And I was based here in Limerick, and I had a part-time person, Mark McManus, a Scottish guy, who was based in Cork, and he would turn up and he would supervise the Cork sessions. Then in the second year, he got a full-time role, so there was 2 of us. And between 1999 up until 204, that was it. That was 2 conditioning staff. And we had a full-time coach, Declan Kidney, and a full-time assistant coach, Niall Donovan. That was our staff, believe it or not. I won't even go through how many there are now, but there's as many staff as there are players. So obviously I had a good career with the senior squad. We were in the Heineken Cup 4 times, Heineken Cup final 4 times, winning 2 of them. Then around 2006, Liam Hennessy, who was the Director of Fitness with the IRFU, approached me and he said, would I be interested in working with the academy in Munster, because the academy system was a bit of a shambles and it just wasn't really happening. And I said no, didn't really want to move. And then in 2008 he came back to me again and he said, would I be interested in taking up the role? And I thought, you know, we've been to the final 4 times, we've won it twice, you know, do we just keep going on looking to win? And you know, there was more to it than that. And then I had family then at this stage, so I was looking for, as well as a satisfying job, I was looking for quality of life. So I said I would do it. And it meant, because the academy don't play games, they play with their clubs, now weekends have been freed up for me. So that's where I am at present, working as the head strength and conditioner with the academy, and we look after age grade as well. And I have 1 graduate from Sports and Exercise Science working with me down in Cork, Joe McGinley. Joe came to me as a student looking for a little bit of experience, and he'd come and help me every morning in the gym and then come to college. And as a result, Joe has ended up with a full-time job with us. And he's not the only one, there's a few cases like that. Not all from here, but it does help. We need to hammer home to our students that it does help. Go and do a bit of work, even if it's for free, and something will come from it. Also in my time with the IRFU, I coached the Irish 7-a-side team, and I was lucky enough to go with them to the World Cup in Dubai in 2009. An absolutely fabulous experience. I'm not that happy that the IRFU aren't into the 7s, because it's now an Olympic program. Because I would love to go to the Olympics with a 7-a-side team. It's a super sport. And then through my time then, I've come right back full circle nearly to the time when I was at National Coaching and Training Centre, where I was doing more education talks. And as I said, it probably wasn't necessarily the right move for me at the time, even though I did enjoy it. But I did a couple of coach education courses with the International Rugby Board, where I became a coach educator and also an educator trainer, if you get me. And luckily they've been flying me around the world, Malaysia, Philippines, Fiji, and I've done a good few in Europe. And I really, really enjoy it, and it will be an area that I would hope I would move more into as time goes on. So finally, so the things that I got out of doing sports science, the things that really mean the most to me. So obviously I said I went to the World Cups. That should be 2009, I couldn't find one. Been around the world, Philippines, Malaysia, Fiji, 4 times in the Heineken Cup final, winning 2 of them. But you know, I got a lot more out of it. They're nice memories, but I got a lot more out of sports science than that. I've met some really good people through this course, members of staff who've now become good friends, members of our class like Marguerite above and her family, who are really, really good friends of our family. Sorry, now I get emotion here, but the best thing that I got out of sports science is my lovely wife and my 3 kids. If it wasn't for sports science, I wouldn't have met Rhoda and had the lovely 3 kids that we have. So that's the best thing that I got out of this course. And I know everyone won't get that out of the course, but that's what I got. So, thanks very much for listening to my little story of my time before and after sports and exercise science. Any questions?